Let me tell you something strange about laughter. We live in a world where everyone talks about emotional intelligence, about vulnerability, about showing up authentically. Yet some people have learned to turn their deepest pain into entertainment. They crack jokes when they're breaking. They smile when they're drowning. They make everyone around them feel lighter while carrying weight no one ever sees. You might know someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that. And here's the question no one ever asks: why? Why would someone choose to laugh when they want to scream? Why would anyone make a joke out of the thing that's destroying them? It's easy to assume people who laugh off pain are just optimists, that they're resilient, that nothing really gets to them. But that's not the full picture. Beneath the surface, there's an entire psychology at play, one that speaks to survival, to childhood, to the invisible cost of being the one who makes everything okay. See, for some people, laughter isn't joy, it's armor. It's the instinct to diffuse tension before it explodes, to make others comfortable so they don't have to face their own discomfort, to turn wounds into punchlines because the alternative, letting people see you're hurt, feels like death. Here's what most people don't understand about humor. It's not just entertainment, it's architecture. It's a defense system built in real time, designed to protect something fragile underneath. Sigmund Freud called it sublimation, the psychological process of transforming unacceptable emotions into socially acceptable ones. You can't scream in a meeting, but you can make a self-deprecating joke. You can't cry at a family gathering, but you can laugh about how everything's falling apart. The pain gets repackaged, the wound gets gift-wrapped, and biologically, it works. When you laugh, your brain releases endorphins, the same chemicals that dull physical pain. Your nervous system interprets laughter as safety. The threat response quiets. Cortisol drops. You've chemically convinced your body that everything's fine. But here's the cost. What starts as survival becomes identity. You become the funny one, the one who lightens every heavy moment, the one people turn to when the room gets tense, and at first it feels good. Being needed like that. Being the emotional thermostat that keeps everything comfortable. But slowly, quietly, something shifts. You start noticing that people love the performance, but rarely ask what's behind it. They laugh at your jokes about struggling, about failing, about hurting. They think you're resilient. They assume you've moved on. They don't realize you're still standing in the fire, just smiling through the smoke. Because here's the invisible truth. Everyone loves the funny one, but no one asks if they're okay. When did it start? Maybe you were 7 years old, watching adults around you fall apart. Maybe you cracked a joke during a fight and watched the tension dissolve. Maybe you realized in that moment, laughter can change the weather in a room. If you're funny enough, people forget to be angry. If you're light enough, maybe they won't leave. And something ancient clicked in your small mind. A survival pattern, a mechanism. If I make them laugh, I control the chaos. If I perform well enough, maybe I'll be safe. Psychologists call this the fawn response. Not fight, flight, or freeze, please. The instinct to make yourself useful, charming, non-threatening. To become what others need so they won't hurt you or abandon you. And the cruelest part? The world rewards you for it. Teachers say you're mature for your age. Relatives say you're always so positive. Friends say you're the easiest person to be around. But no one ever stops to ask what it costs you. No one notices that you've learned to read rooms before you speak. That you scan faces for tension. That you calculate exactly what kind of humour will diffuse exactly what kind of discomfort. It's not conscious anymore, it's reflex. You've become an emotional firefighter, and laughter is your only extinguisher. But here's the tragedy. The better you get at it, the more invisible your pain becomes. People start saying things like, "You're so strong, nothing gets to you. I wish I could be like that." And you smile. You make another joke. You confirm their perception because the alternative, letting them see the truth, feels impossible. So you keep the mask on, you keep performing, and somewhere along the way you forget it's a mask at all. When did laughter stop being joy and start being armor? When did the thing that once made you feel alive become the thing keeping you from feeling anything real? Fast forward to adulthood. You're successful by most measures. You have friends, a career, maybe even a relationship, but something's wrong. Something aches. Because you've never had a relationship that felt completely safe. Every time someone gets close enough to see past the jokes, you panic. You either deflect with more humour, turning every serious conversation into comedy, or you quietly disappear before they can see the parts of you that aren't performing. Intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means letting someone witness your pain without turning it into material. And that feels like dying. There's a psychological concept called impression management. It's the conscious or unconscious process of trying to influence how others perceive you. Most people do this to some degree. We all curate ourselves in social situations, but for people who laugh off pain, impression management becomes hypervigilance. It's not just about making a good impression, it's about survival, about maintaining the version of yourself that keeps people close but not too close, that makes you valuable but not vulnerable. You become a master at it. You know exactly which stories to tell and which to bury. You know how to turn your worst moments into your best material. You've learned that if you laugh at yourself first, no one else can hurt you with it. But here's the hidden cost. You start to lose track of what's real. When you spend years performing a version of yourself, even you start believing it. You look in the mirror and see the funny one, the strong one, the one who's got it all together, and somewhere deep down a voice whispers, "But is that really me?" The mask doesn't just hide you from others, it hides you from yourself. Your friends love you, but have you ever called them crying? Have you ever said, "I'm not okay," without immediately following it with "just kidding"? You're the one people call at 2 a.m, the one who always has perspective, who always makes them feel better. But who do you call? No one, because you've learned something devastating. People love the comedian, not the person. They love what you do for them, not who you are without the act. And the loneliest thing in the world is being surrounded by people who think they know you while you're dying inside, completely unseen. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with this. It's not physical tiredness. It's the exhaustion of constantly translating your internal experience into something digestible for others. Of filtering every honest feeling through the question, how can I make this funny? You're at a party. Someone asks how you're doing. The real answer? You're barely holding it together. Work is overwhelming. A relationship is crumbling. You're questioning everything about your life. But what comes out? Oh, living the dream. If the dream is a combination of coffee addiction and existential dread. Everyone laughs. You've done it again. Turned crisis into comedy. And for a moment you feel that familiar relief. You're safe. You're liked. You're in control. But later, driving home alone, the silence is deafening. Because you just spent 3 hours performing and no one, not one person, knows what's actually happening in your life. This is the invisible prison. You're surrounded by people but completely alone. Connected but never truly seen. Popular but never known. This is what happens when childhood survival becomes adult identity. Humour has become both shield and prison. It protects you from being hurt, but it also prevents you from being held. At work you're known as the one who never complains, who makes difficult days bearable. Your boss loves you because you don't create drama. Colleagues lean on you for emotional support, but inside, you're numb, completely numb. Because here's what happens when you spend years repressing pain with laughter. The repression spreads. You don't just suppress the bad feelings, you suppress all feelings. Joy becomes muted. Love becomes suspicious. Peace becomes boring. You've trained your emotional system to stay in performance mode so long that you've forgotten how to feel without editorializing it, without turning it into content, without making it palatable for others. Psychologists call this emotional flattening. When you consistently invalidate your own feelings, when you constantly minimize your pain through humor, your emotional range begins to compress. The highs aren't as high. The lows become this dull, persistent ache you've learned to ignore. You start noticing it in strange moments. Someone gives you good news. You should feel excited, but instead, you feel nothing, just the immediate instinct to make a joke about it. Someone hurts you. You should feel angry, but instead you're already composing the funny story you'll tell about it later. Your emotions have become content before they're even experiences, and the scary part, you've become so good at this that you don't even notice it happening anymore. The translation from feeling to performance is instantaneous, automatic. You've essentially trained yourself out of authentic emotional experience. There's a term in psychology, alexithymia. It means the inability to identify and describe emotions. And while people who laugh off pain can often identify others' emotions brilliantly, They've become strangers to their own. They know what they're supposed to feel. They know what would make sense to feel, but what they actually feel, that's become a mystery. And relationships follow a pattern. You attract people drawn to your light, your humour, your seeming unshakability. But those same people can never reach you. Because the moment the relationship demands emotional honesty, you make a joke, change the subject, perform your way out of depth. They say things like, "I feel like I don't really know you," or "Why won't you let me in?" Or "It's like you're afraid to be serious." And they're right. Because being serious means being seen. And being seen means risking rejection of who you actually are, not just the version you perform. Here's the cruel irony. The very thing that attracts people to you, your humour, your lightness, your ability to make everything feel easy, becomes the wall that keeps them out. They fall for the performance and then feel betrayed when they realise there's a person behind it they're not allowed to meet, and you want to let them in. God, you want to. But the vulnerability feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. Every time you get close to real honesty, to dropping the jokes and just being honest about how you feel, your nervous system screams danger. Abort, deflect, perform. So you do. You make a joke. You lighten the mood. You save them from the discomfort of your real emotions. And in doing so, you save yourself from the terror of being truly known. But at what cost? The relationships never go deep. They stay surface level, pleasant, easy, and you tell yourself that's enough. That depth is overrated anyway, that you're not one of those people who needs to process everything. But late at night, when you're alone, you feel it. That ache, that longing for someone who sees past the jokes, who doesn't need you to be funny, who can sit with you in silence and not feel uncomfortable, who knows the real you and loves that person, not just the performance. So you keep people at arm's length, close enough to feel connection, far enough to maintain control, and the loneliness compounds, builds, becomes a weight you carry silently because even your loneliness gets turned into self-deprecating humour. Then one day, something breaks. Maybe it's a loss too big to laugh away, a death, a betrayal, a failure that can't be reframed, and you try. God, you try. You reach for the jokes, the deflection, the performance, but nothing comes. The mechanism jams, and for the first time in years, you're standing in your pain with no escape route, no punchline, no audience to save you from yourself. You sit alone, staring at your phone, scrolling through messages from people who think you're fine, and you realise something horrifying. No one actually knows you, not one person. You've built an entire life on making others feel okay so you wouldn't have to notice you weren't. The collapse isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It's sitting in the shower too tired to stand, staring at the ceiling at 4 a.m, wondering who you'd even call if you admitted you were drowning. It's the slow, suffocating realisation that you've been performing so long, you don't remember who you are when no one's watching. And here's what makes it even more isolating. You can't even talk about it in your usual way. You can't make jokes about having a breakdown because the breakdown is about the jokes themselves. The very coping mechanism that saved you has become the cage. You start questioning everything. How much of your personality is real? How much is performance? If you stopped being funny, would anyone still want you around? If you showed people your pain without the filter of humour, would they stay or would they run? These questions terrify you because you don't know the answers, and you've built your entire identity on being certain, on being the person who has it together enough to make everyone else feel better. But you don't have it together. You never did. You were just better at hiding it than most people. There's a concept in psychology called defensive pessimism versus strategic optimism. Defensive pessimism is preparing for the worst to manage anxiety. But what you've been doing is something else entirely. It's strategic humour. Using jokes not to express how you feel, but to prevent anyone from asking. And when that strategy fails, when the jokes don't come and the pain sits there raw and unprocessed, you're left facing something you've been running from for years. Yourself. The real you. The one underneath the performance. The one who hurts and doesn't know how to ask for help because asking would mean admitting the act was an act all along. This is the cost of learning that your pain was less important than everyone else's comfort. This is what happens when laughter becomes the only language you speak and you forget how to ask for help without turning it into a joke. But here's what nobody tells you. That collapse, that moment when the jokes stop working, That's not the end. That's the beginning. Because healing doesn't start with fixing, it starts with witnessing. You don't need to stop being funny. You don't need to abandon humor. You just need to stop using it as a wall. Here's the truth. Laughter saved you. It kept you safe when nothing else could. It was intelligent. It was survival. You should honor that. But you're not that child anymore. You're not helpless. You're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. You're not required to be the light to deserve love. The healing begins when you give yourself permission to stop performing, to let someone, even just one person, see you without the jokes, without the deflection, without the armor. And yes, it will feel terrifying at first. Every instinct will scream to make a joke, to lighten the mood, to take care of their discomfort with your pain. But what if you didn't? What if you said, "I'm not okay," and left it there? No punchline, no performance, just truth. What if you cried and didn't apologize for it? What if you let someone sit with you in silence, in mess, in the raw, unedited truth of what you're feeling? That's not weakness. That's courage. That's the beginning of real connection. Because authentic intimacy isn't about making people comfortable. It's about being real and trusting they can handle it. And if they can't, that says nothing about your worth. It says everything about their capacity. Here's what's beautiful about this process. When you finally let yourself be seen without the performance, without the joke softening every edge, something shifts. Not in them, in you. You start to remember what it feels like to just exist without performing, to have a feeling and not immediately think, how can I package this for others? To be sad and just be sad, to be scared and just be scared, to be angry without making it funny. And slowly, very slowly, you start building a different relationship with your emotions. Instead of seeing them as threats that need to be managed through humor, you start seeing them as information, as valid experiences, as parts of being human that don't need to be translated or softened or performed. This doesn't mean you lose your sense of humor. It means humor becomes a choice instead of a reflex. It means you can be funny when something's actually funny, not when you're actually hurting. There's a difference between laughing with life and laughing off life, between using humor to connect and using humor to hide. And learning that difference, that's where freedom lives. You've spent so long being what others needed. Maybe it's time to discover what you need. Start small. Notice when you reach for humor to avoid feeling. When someone asks how you are and your reflex is to deflect. With a joke, pause, just for a second. Try honesty, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm actually having a hard time. Watch what happens. The people who truly care won't run. They'll lean in. They'll say, tell me more. They'll hold space for your pain without needing you to package it palatably. Those are your people. Not the ones who love your comedy, the ones who love your complexity. And slowly you'll start relearning something you forgot. That laughter can be joy again, not just defense. That you can be funny and honest, light and deep. That you can make people laugh without erasing yourself in the process. This is integration. Not rejection of humor, but expansion beyond it. You know what's fascinating? When you stop using humor as armor, when you let yourself be seen in your pain and your joy, your humor actually becomes funnier, more authentic, more magnetic. Because humor that comes from wholeness hits different than humor that comes from hiding. People can feel the difference, even if they can't name it. When you joke from a place of genuine lightness rather than defensive deflection, it creates real connection instead of performing distance. The funniest people, the ones whose humor actually heals rather than just distracts, are the ones who've learned to be serious too, who can sit in depth and then genuinely find the absurdity in life. Not because they're running from pain, but because they've made peace with it. There's a concept in comedy called punching up versus punching down, but there's another dimension to it. There's joking out versus joking in. Joking out is using humor to push people away, to keep them from seeing you. Joking in is using humor to bring people closer, to share a genuine moment of levity. And when you heal this pattern, you move from joking out to joking in. Your humor becomes invitation instead of barrier, connection instead of protection. You're not choosing between being the funny one and being the real one. You're just finally letting people see both. The light and the fractures, the jokes and the grief, the performance and the person underneath it. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And maybe who you truly are is someone who can laugh and cry. Someone who can be light without denying their darkness. Someone who makes others feel good without sacrificing their own emotional truth. When you finally let people see all of you, something magical happens. You become more magnetic, not less. Because authenticity is rarer than humour. Vulnerability is braver than jokes. And the people who matter will love you more for your honesty than they ever did for your entertainment. Here's the paradox. You thought being vulnerable would make you weak, that dropping the humour would make you less interesting, that letting people see your pain would make them uncomfortable and drive them away. But the opposite happens when you finally let someone see you without the mask, without the jokes, without the performance. They feel honoured. Because you've given them something most people never give, access to your real self. Not the curated version, not the palatable version, the real, messy, complicated version. And that creates intimacy that humour alone never could. There's something profoundly powerful about being in a room with someone and not feeling the need to perform, about sitting in silence and not scrambling to fill it with a joke, about crying and not immediately making a quip about how you must look, about being angry and not deflecting it with self-deprecating humour. That's what presence feels like. That's what connection feels like. That's what being truly seen feels like. And once you've tasted it, once you've experienced what it's like to be loved for who you are rather than what you do for others, you can't go back. The performance starts to feel hollow. The jokes start to feel like exactly what they are, armour you don't need anymore. This doesn't mean every relationship will be deep. It doesn't mean you'll never joke again. It means you get to choose. You get to decide when humour is appropriate and when honesty is needed. You're no longer imprisoned by the reflex. And maybe most importantly, you start to develop a different relationship with yourself. You stop being the person who needs to make everything okay, who needs to manage everyone's emotions, who needs to translate pain into something more digestible. You become someone who can sit with your own feelings without needing to immediately process them through humour. Someone who can be sad without making it a bit. Someone who can be scared without turning it into comedy. That's not losing your personality, that's finding it. So if you're someone who's spent your life laughing off pain, know this. You're not broken for building that armour. You're brilliant, but you're also allowed to take it off now. You're allowed to rest, to feel, to be held in your pain instead of performing through it. You don't have to be the light for everyone else to deserve dawn. You were never the joke. You were always the person underneath it, worthy of being seen, worthy of being known, worthy of love that doesn't require a performance. And maybe, for the first time, you can laugh freely, not to protect yourself, not to save others, but simply because something's actually funny. That's the sound of someone who's finally free.